We're happy to have you with us on this Monday morning, and we begin today in Washington, where the White House is walking back comments made by President Biden in Poland. In a direct and dramatic finish to his European trip, President Biden called for an end to Vladimir Putin's grip on Russia that sounded like a provocative call for regime change in Russia.
We will have a different future, a brighter future, rooted in democracy and principles, hope and light, of decency and dignity, of freedom and possibilities. For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
The White House quickly clarified that remark in a statement, saying in part, here you can see on your screen, the president's point was that Putin cannot be allowed to exercise power over his neighbors or the region. He was not discussing Putin's power in Russia or regime change. NBC News White House correspondent Carol Lee joins us now from Washington. Carol, good morning. So, I mean, this is possibly President Biden's most passionate, most stirring speech about the war in Ukraine. But now this morning, the focus is on the White House playing defense about those few words ad-libbed at the end, condemning President Putin. What is the reaction this morning?
Yeah, Savannah, this was really the capstone to what the White House felt was a very successful trip by the president to Europe at a critical time. He had reassured allies while in Brussels. He had a number of meetings with European officials. He met with refugees near the Ukrainian-Polish border. And he gave, as you said, that really impassioned speech, which was stirring and was widely received as very good. And what it had the messages that folks felt that the president should have brought to this particular moment. But as you said, those last few lines are what is overshadowing everything. And so the White House had to issue that statement trying to clarify this. And then you had Secretary of State Antony Blinken traveling in the Middle East being asked about this and again having to clarify. Take a listen.
I think the president, the White House, made the point last night that, quite simply, President Putin cannot be empowered to wage war or engage in aggression against Ukraine or anyone else. As you know, and as you've heard us say repeatedly, we do not have a strategy of regime change in Russia or anywhere else for that matter.
So you hear the White House, the administration, really wanting to clarify that the U.S. does not have a policy of regime change in Russia. That's a very distinct and specific policy when it comes to U.S. government. But a lot of people, Savannah, might be looking at this and saying, what's here to clarify here? You have a president who's called Vladimir Putin a butcher, who said he's a war criminal, and among other things. And so that would suggest that he doesn't want Putin to stay in power. And yet the White House is saying this is not our official policy.
Yeah, and putting them in this position to exactly that, have to say, no, it's not what we said, it's not what we meant, but to your point, what do they mean then? Now, Biden's own words have therefore put him at these odds with this messaging that his administration has had ongoing with Ukraine. Is the White House now concerned that the president's statement could impact the U.S.'s ability to help negotiate peace between Ukraine and Russia, or could it potentially escalate things? Or to your point, is it sort of just a different version of what we've heard?
Yeah, it's the concern, and the reason why you're hearing them try to clarify this is they're concerned that if it sends the message that the U.S. has a policy of regime change, then could that, instigate more aggressive action from Vladimir Putin? Or does that play into Russian propaganda that says that the U.S.'s goal and NATO's goal is regime change within Russia? So that's why they're trying to clarify this, even though, as you said, at the same time, based on all the other things that the president has said, one could legitimately conclude that he doesn't think Vladimir Putin should stay in power. And so at best, this is confusing, Savannah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Carol, quickly, the president's comments come as a new NBC News poll found that 7 in 10 Americans expressed low confidence in President Biden's ability to deal with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. How's the White House responding to those numbers? Not great.
Yeah, this is not a good sign for the White House. And I got to say, this is also why a moment like this, where the president comes out and says something and then his aides walk it back and they have to clarify and there's confusion, just sort of feeds this view that the president maybe isn't the best at handling this crisis.
All right, Carol Lee, thank you so much. Now, on the ground in Ukraine, 2 missile strikes hit the western city of Lviv Saturday. It's been seen as a safe haven and has been the destination of many internally displaced Ukrainians. It's also less than 50 miles from the Polish border where President Biden was visiting at the time. NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us now from Lviv. Gabe, good morning. So one of these missiles hit a fuel depot that's extremely close, actually, to a residential neighborhood. What else can you tell us about these strikes?
Hey there, Savannah. Good morning. Well, yes, the first one came early Saturday afternoon, just a few hours before President Biden was set to speak. And it did hit that fuel depot. Local officials say that at least 5 people were injured, no one killed. A few hours after that, there was a second strike that hit a military factory. Again, these were precision strikes, but the first one, as you mentioned, Savannah, came dangerously close to a residential area. We saw some of the damage yesterday, and the blast, the blast wave rather, hit several buildings nearby, shattering windows in that neighborhood, tearing the side off a warehouse as well. But yes, less than 50 miles from the Polish border, NATO territory, just as President Biden was there. Yeah. Savannah?
Now, some peace talks between Russia and Ukraine will continue, with negotiations taking place in Turkey this week. And now this comes as Ukrainian President Zelensky says he's prepared to discuss neutrality with Russia. How big of a concession would that be, and what kind of impact could that have on the negotiations?
Well, Savannah, some mixed signals here from Ukrainian officials. We have been hearing that Ukrainian officials in the east may have been, and that's a big may have been amenable to some sort of at least discussion about, the territory on the eastern side of this country. And some analysts have wondered, could that be a concession, perhaps, where Ukraine might be carved up, where, Russian-backed separatists in the east might be able to keep that territory. But overnight, President Zelensky went back to his hard line and saying comments that territorial sovereignty in Ukraine is really a non-starter, that he is not willing to compromise on that. And just a few hours ago, we heard from a spokesman from the Interior Minister here in Ukraine saying that he doesn't expect there to be any major breakthrough of these peace talks, but that it's important to continue negotiations. Of course, the fighting is raging in many parts of this country, Savannah, especially to the east and south.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gabe, before I let you go, I do want to ask you about something we have an update on this morning. A Ukrainian-American pastor who was reported abducted just over a week ago has, according to his family, been freed. What can you tell us about his release?
Yeah, Savannah, we just heard from Dmitry Badyu's family. He is 50 years old. He is a U.S. citizen, a Ukrainian-American pastor who is very well known in the southern city of Melitopol. And his family had told us that he had been abducted on March 19th by about 8 to 10 Russian soldiers, and they had not heard from him for several days. Well, just this morning, we heard from his daughter, and she says that he has been freed. So some good news there. It is unclear the circumstances of that. No further details were immediately available about his release, Savannah.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez, thank you so much. Now, the flow of Ukrainians into Eastern Europe is showing no sign of slowing down. Nearly 4 million Ukrainians have now fled the country, with the majority heading to neighboring Poland. NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman joins us now from Warsaw, Poland, with the latest. Hey, Josh, good morning. So, Warsaw has seen a huge influx of refugees. We've actually been hearing for a while now that city officials say they are straining to accommodate them all, to find resources for them all. What's the situation like there this morning, and what do we know about refugees who are waiting for a chance to now get to the United States?
Well, certainly, Savannah, Poland is filled to the brim right now with Ukrainians who have fled their homeland and are trying to find somewhere to stay that is safe during this war. Now, President Biden's announcement that the U.S. would take in up to 100,000 Ukrainian refugees has given a lot of hope to some Ukrainians who hope that might mean that they can travel to the United States. But it is extremely complicated, as we learned from speaking to some of those refugees today outside the U.S. Embassy here in Warsaw, where there is a long line line every day. Part of the problem is that 100,000 that President Biden announced, that's not just one program. That is to bring in people through the traditional refugee program, through immigrant visas, through non-immigrant visas, through other avenues of getting into the U.S., including parole, which means if you're a Ukrainian in Poland right now and you're trying to figure out how do you get to the United States, it is not easy. The process is very long. You're supposed to wait sometimes months for an appointment. And if you're a U.S. citizen who's trying to sponsor a Ukrainian relative to come to the U.S. on an immigrant visa, that immigrant is supposed to make their way somehow to Frankfurt, Germany to start that processing. And I want you to meet Aaron Arrett, who is a U.S. citizen from Florida, who we met this morning. He flew here because his mother-in-law, who's 84 and Ukrainian, she fled to Poland. They've got a plane ticket for her to get to the United States, but they have shown up. Today was the third day they showed up at the embassy trying to find someone to explain to them how she can get the visa she needs. Here's what he had to say.
We have her now in Warsaw, Poland, and she's in a wheelchair and a walker, and she's alone, and we have a flight back to the United States in a week, and we can't get an appointment until June 27th, 2022. How is she going to survive and be taken care of, and we'll be left alone here in Poland?
And Savannah, for so many of these refugees, visa issues are the last thing they need to be dealing with right now. They're already in a new country. Most of them have left husbands, fathers, brothers back in Ukraine, and they are struggling to figure out what the future is going to look like, while also trying to figure out if and when they can get into the United States. Savannah?
Absolutely a harrowing process there. Now, Josh, over the weekend, President Biden made several stops to refugee centers in Poland. We saw lots of pictures, lots of videos from those visits. What's the reaction been like to the president's visit, and is the U.S. planning on sending more aid to these refugees and to the countries housing them that, as we said, have strapped resources?
Yeah. Well, look, President Biden's visit to this region was very warmly received. We saw Polish President Duda say it was a clear signal of U.S. support for these countries that are really bearing the brunt of this refugee crisis. And to that end, President Biden has announced an additional $1 billion in humanitarian assistance that was recently approved by Congress. It's going to be going to these countries like Poland that are dealing with this influx of refugees. Part of that will help through USAID, other efforts to make sure people are fed, clothed, and that there are the resources to take in what is really the largest influx of refugees in Europe since World War II, Savannah.
All right, Josh Letterman, thank you so much.
Let's bring in NBC News and MSNBC military analyst, Colonel Jack Jacobs. Colonel, good to have you with us. So I do want to start with those comments by President Biden saying Vladimir Putin can't stay in power. There's been a lot of blowback to that ad lib, which the White House has been walking back. But here's the reaction from Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S.
We heard President Biden loud and clear that U.S. is and will be with Ukraine in this fight. We clearly understand in Ukraine that anyone who's a war criminal, who attacked neighboring country, who's doing all these atrocities together with all the Russians that are involved, definitely cannot stay in power in a civilized world.
So, Colonel, what do you make of that response from the ambassador? Do you think this is going to help or hurt the U.S. as it works to bring an end to the war?
Well, the ambassador's response, that's exactly what any ambassador from Ukraine would have said. But I'll be charitable. The president's remarks were probably the least helpful thing he possibly could have said. And if Putin were not paranoid about American intentions before the remark, he certainly is now.
Colonel, I want to turn to what's happening on the ground in Kyiv. Ukrainian forces have managed to repel all of Russia's advances onto the capital so far, even taking back some ground from the Russians. So with peace talks set to resume today, do you think Ukraine has more leverage now at the bargaining table, or do you fear Putin is less likely to bargain from a position of weakness?
Yeah, I think the latter. I'll be surprised if there's any progress in these talks. Putin is still convinced he can take not all of Ukraine, but most of Ukraine, and certainly the eastern part. They're bogged down around Kiev because of the Ukrainians' very tough defense and the ineptitude of the Russian forces. They're focusing very seriously on the south, on Mariupol, which is almost totally destroyed. Russia's focus on Mariupol is important for the Russians because Putin wants to control all of Ukraine's Black Sea Black Sea coastline.
And Colonel, when it comes to Russia's overall strategy in Ukraine, they now say they're focused on capturing the southeastern part of the country. But since then, we've seen those rocket attacks in the west near Lviv. So do you think Russia is truly focused on the eastern part of Ukraine? And what do you think is their motivation right now?
Yeah, they're still focused on the east, but they want to disrupt resupplies. They want to disrupt the evacuation of civilians. And that's one of the reasons why they're focusing rocket attacks, indirect fire, missile attacks on specific targets in the West. At the end of the day, they may have to settle for success in the East, but they're continuing the terroristic attacks on civilian targets as well as military ones in the West to prevent the resupply of Ukrainian forces.
Colonel Jack Jacobs, as always, thank you for your analysis. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Let's turn now to something everyone's talking about this morning, the Oscars last night. The night was overshadowed by a single moment that did not involve any awards.
Yeah, at first it had people in the audience and at home wondering if it was even real, if it was a joke. Will Smith went on stage and slapped comedian Chris Rock for making a joke about his wife. Then a short time later, Smith took the stage again when he won an Oscar.
It all started with a joke by presenter Chris Rock directed at Jada Pinkett Smith.
G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it.
Moments later, Will Smith rushed the stage, slapping Rock. Uncensored clips that aired in other countries showed what Smith said after.
Keep my wife's name out your mouth!
Pinkett Smith revealed in 2018 she had alopecia, which causes hair loss. About 40 minutes after the stunning altercation, Will Smith won his first Oscar, portraying the father of Serena and Venus Williams in the film King Richard.
I'm being called on in my life to love people and to protect people and to be a river to my people. I want to apologize to the Academy. I want to apologize to all my fellow nominees. Love will make you do crazy things.
All of it casting a shadow over Hollywood's biggest night, including a historic win for Best Picture.
Coda.
For the first time, a streaming service won the top prize, Apple TV Plus's feel-good feature, Coda. In the coveted acting categories, Jessica Chastain scored her first Oscar, and Ariana DeBose earned the supporting actress trophy for playing Anita in West Side Story, the same role that won Rita Moreno an Oscar 60 years ago.
You see a queer, openly queer woman of color, an Afro-Latina, who found her strength in life through art.
And Coda's Troy Kotsur became the first deaf man to win an acting Oscar, dedicating the award to his late father.
Dad, I learned so much from you. I'll always love you. You are my hero. Thank you.
And the musical performances featured some of the biggest hits of the year and A-list stars from Billie Eilish to Beyonce.
It feels so good to be alive.
As for that Smith Rock incident, in a statement released overnight, the LAPD said they were aware of the incident, that Chris Rock declined to file a police report, but he could do so at a later date if he chooses to. NBC News is out to both Rock and Will Smith for comment. Haven't heard back yet. The Academy posted a statement on social media saying it does not condone violence of any form, but critics quickly replied saying they believe the Academy did condone it last night.
Now joining us to break down more of the big moments from last night is entertainment journalist and pop culture expert and our friend Brian Balthazar. Brian, good morning. Thanks for being with us. So obviously we have to start with that moment between Will Smith and Chris Rock. So during the commercial break, actually, we know a little bit more. Denzel Washington apparently went over to talk with Will Smith. We'll reference that actually in his acceptance speech. But what do we know about that conversation or any more fallout from this incident?
Well, Denzel apparently said, be careful when you're at the top because that's when they come for you. I'm paraphrasing there. And Will did obviously reference that during his speech. You know, what's so interesting about the day and age that we live in now is so many people like myself weren't sure what was going on. And so I have DVR. I paused it because the sound, you know, obviously the censors took out the sound when this incident happened. And initially we saw that Will Smith laughed at this joke.
Right.
but we did see that Jada did not. And it was then that this unfolded. And it was really hard to believe because, Oscars and award shows like this sometimes have stunts. And it was very clear, even to the audience wasn't sure what was really going on. Was this a bit? Was this a comedic bit? And then it became very clear, obviously, during the censored moments that we could see on Twitter almost immediately afterwards that this was a very real, very awkward and very tense situation that none of us saw coming.
It'd be interesting to see what more we hear. Yeah, in the coming days on this. The word overshadowed is being used a lot, so let's talk about what was overshadowed, some of the other major moments, including Coda making history, the first streaming film to win Best Picture. That's an Apple film. There are also a few firsts in the acting categories. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so we have Ariana DeBose, who you saw in that piece there, winning Best Supporting Actress for West Side Story. And what an emotional speech. It was really a great way to start the show, talking about the adversity that she's faced in her career and just in her life. And coming out on top here. So it was a beautiful, beautiful moment for her. And of course, Troy Kotsur from Coda, Best Supporting Actor. I mean, that speech, I don't think you can script something that beautifully. It was just, had the perfect blend of emotion and humor. And it was a really emotional moment for a lot of viewers, I think, too. And it was really wonderful to see that, too. And of course, Coda, being an independent film, kind of the unsung hero of films at the beginning of the year to emerge. And then you see Marlee Matlin, who was the first deaf actress to win an Oscar, to be back up on that stage. I have to wonder what was going through her mind because, there's a limited number of roles for deaf actors and actresses. So to see them all up there, I think it was a beautiful moment, very touching.
Oh, absolutely. Now, Brian, the show did receive a lot of criticism this year. One thing that was about was this somewhat controversial move where the Academy decided to present some of the awards before the televised broadcast began, but then they did edit some clips from that into the show. But overall, how did the move go over, and do you think it's something that will continue next year?
It was kind of clunky a little bit that they then ran that portion of the awards into the show. I mean, realizing, though, that you save a lot of time when you cut out the walk-up. And, of course, some of the speeches were inevitably cut short. So that was an issue. But I think we need to accept that the Oscars are going to be long. Let's just accept it. It's one night a year. Let everyone have their moment that we can and try and accept it. It's going to run long anyway. So what's a few more minutes?
And, Brian, quickly, I want to hit on just a few of the other things that came out. Award shows always have a few political moments this year. We saw the host take aim at the Florida Don't Say Gay bill, plus the broadcast included a quick moment of silence for Ukraine. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Mila Kunis, who's Ukrainian, came up to talk a little bit about the situation there. And, there had been this pre-Oscars talk about whether or not they were going to invite the president of Ukraine to speak. That was obviously very controversial. Actors voicing their opinion like Sean Penn. So there was a moment of silence and encouragement for people to donate. And then, of course, the host talked about in Florida, this was going to be a very gay Oscars, referencing Don't Say Gay. And Jessica Chastain also spoke to the emotional journeys of the gay and lesbian community. So there were a lot of moments there. But, typically there are a little bit of that in the Oscars. So I'm not surprised at that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Brian Balthazar, a lot to get through this morning for people who maybe, like I did, was asleep when some of this happened. Thanks
Woke
so
up
much.
To go,
all
right.
Things got more interesting after I went to bed. All right, thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, let's see if Bill Karen's got some sleep. We're going to check on your morning news now, weather.
Hi, Bill. Good morning.
No, I was like you guys, too. I was about, I think I woke up about like an hour after it happened, and I was like, missed it. It's
an
like,
hour after, yeah.
It's like missing the end of a great sporting event. Yeah, I know. So I apologized at the end of last week for what was going to happen over the weekend with the snow and the cold, and I keep apologizing because it's not fun this morning. There's been snow covering the roads in Connecticut, especially around New Haven. Many accidents on I-95. There's been some snow in areas of Maine. There's a good band of snow coming down between Buffalo and Erie, Pennsylvania. So you get the idea. This is a winter-like morning, and these wind chills are just not fun. I really hope everyone didn't put their winter clothes away. There's a saying that goes in this portion of the country. You get like, your first false spring, your second false spring, and then finally it's actually spring. So at this point, we must be in just past our second false spring because it is winter this morning. 0 in Vermont right now. We're at -7 up in northern Minnesota and International Falls. And it's not like it's, any better to the south. And we're in the 20s right now in D.C. and even New York is at 12. So So today it's going to be just a downright cold day for this time of year, about 20 to 30 degrees colder than it should be. And for this date, these will be some of the lowest high temperatures ever recorded on this date. So we actually keep records of stuff like that. So only 25 degrees for your high today, the end of March. Tomorrow morning is going to be the same. It's going to be cold once again. And then as we go towards the middle of the week, things begin to get more back to normal and maybe even a little warmer than that. So the big weather story this week, the cold at the start of the week, but then we're going to watch that storm, guys, coming across the country. We'll talk more about this next hour, but unfortunately, the tornado threat returns to the south, the same areas that were just hit a week ago.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Bill. So I'm going to keep our eye on.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.